Hello and welcome back. So in this video, what I'm going to do is actually provision the second virtual machine. If you missed the first video where we did create the virtual network, define the address space, and created the subnet, created this Windows 10 virtual machine, and now we're going to go ahead create the second virtual machine, which is going to be we're going to provision it as a domain controller. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so if we go to virtual machine, you should see that Windows 10 VM we define, as you see the name here. I'm just trying to keep it consistent with the diagram, so I'm going to edit this as we go as well. Windows 10. We should see the private IP and the public IP by now, so let's go ahead and do that. So this is the public IP, 155. And for you guys, seeing the public IP, I know it's a concern, but these VMs, as soon as I finish here, these VMs are going to be off and deleted actually. So that's 20.155.24.228. Okay. Okay, so let's get the private IP for this. Oh, I have it mixed up, so let's move this. There you go. Let's get the private IP for this particular VM, and then we're going to move on to the next one. All right, so I'm going to go to networking, and then the private IP is 10.244.1 because this is indeed in the .1 subnet. .4, and you may ask why isn't it .2, .3, and I'm going to explain that shortly. Okay, so Azure reserves. Yes, Azure reserves 5 IP addresses within each subnet. So there's a network address, and there's a .0, which is a network address. The .1 reserved by Azure for default gateway. The 2 and 3 is reserved by Azure to map the Azure DNS IPs to the VNet space, and of course the .255 is a network broadcast address. So hence the reason we have a .4 IP address, and as you keep adding VMs, it's gonna continue .5, .6, .7, so on. So yeah, so now let's go back here and actually create this second VM. We're gonna call it VIDC. Put it in the same resource group. So we're gonna call it VI-DC. Same region as the VNet. I already explained this in the last video, the availability options. We're going to keep this at default where it is for now, security type standard. And we're going to change the OS here. We want server 2016. I know there's a 2020, but just for the sake of cost, we're going to keep this low. Let's see if we can get this any lower than $36 a month. I got a $10. That's 1 gig of RAM. Might be too slow. Okay, so let's keep that where it is. Okay, so I'm gonna create an admin account, and I'm gonna keep 3389 RDP port open just for the sake of this video. So yeah. Okay, so we're onto disk. OS type this. Let's keep this as standard SSD. We know what's recommended, but we're not going to do a whole lot with this particular domain controller. Networking, we're going to keep this in the East US VNet, and this is going to be, this is accurate, the .2 subnet, as you see in the diagram here. Keep this in the .2 subnet. We're going to keep the basic, keep the port open, next management. We're going to keep all these as default. Fast is default. Tag is no tag. Review and create. Validation pass. So we're going to go ahead and create this VM. Okay, so let's go and see if that this domain controller VM is created. Well, I clicked on the wrong thing there. Virtual machines. There we go. So we have the DC. Let's get this public IP just to fill our diagram here. Copy. And let's get the private IP. As you saw, we clicked on the virtual machine, then we went to networking. That's where we can get the private IP. And here we go. Copy this, set the private IP. All right, so let's keep the format. Yeah, so to quick overview, we already created the virtual machine with the, we created the virtual network with the 10.244 with the /60 insider. And we created the virtual machines, a Windows 10 virtual machine and a Windows 2016 data center VM. So what we're going to do is actually with this particular VM, the DC, we're going to promote it and give it a role of the domain controller. And we're going to bind this Windows 10 to the domain. So we're just, doing a few demonstration here. So what I'm going to do now is actually let's connect to each of these VMs. Okay, well, I see the DC is still in the creating status. Let's refresh this actually. Okay, so they're both running. So let's first connect to the Windows 10 machine. And I'm connecting via the public IP. I know the username. So that's 20.115.24.228. Okay, I already put in the public IP, connected, and we get the certificate warning. We want to select yes there. And here we are inside, logged into our Windows 10 virtual machine, as you see here. So yeah, we should see the specs that we defined when creating this particular virtual machine. So let's take a look at that. All right, so we have an 8 gig. Well, no, wrong computer. Here we go. So the device name, as we call it from our diagram, is VI Windows 10. We have 4 gigs. Not the fastest, but just for the sake of minimizing costs and maximizing the free credits, we kept it low. And as far as the hard drive, we do have a 126. And all VMs, keep in mind, comes with a temporary storage, a D drive. So let's go ahead now and actually minimize this, and we're going to go ahead and connect to the domain controller. Well, not a domain controller yet, but we're going to connect to this particular VM and then give it a role of the domain controller. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's go ahead and get connected. As you saw, we got connected to the Windows 10 machine. Let's get connected to the server now. So one thing I want to mention here is when you're making changes, if you want to change the IP address or any network interface change, don't make it from within the virtual machine itself, because you could potentially lock yourself out. What you want to do is click on the VM, and you want to go to networking. You're going to see the particular network interface. You just want to click on that. And what you want to do is go to IP configurations. And what you will see here is the IP that's assigned here, the private and the public IP. And if you want to make changes there, it's best you make the change from here. Whether you want to change a public IP, or maybe you want to set a static IP and or keep this as a static IP, or maybe set a different IP. You can do that. But for now, we're just going to keep that. But just keep that in mind. You don't want to make change from within while logged into the virtual machine and go into network settings and make any change there. You want to always make it from within the portal itself. So let's get connected to this particular virtual machine. Let's see. So this is 124.18.22. Okay, so we're signing in here. Server manager is gonna launch, but before we actually promote the server, we just want to take a look at the specs to ensure that it is what we provisioned, which I have no doubt there. Okay, so let's go to PC. Keep in mind, this server will not be the fastest. All right, we have a Windows Server 2016 data center, 4 gigs of RAM. We do have a Xeon Platinum CPU here. And let's look at the storage space. And as I mentioned, we will see a D drive here as well. By default, this is temporary storage. So let's have a 126 gig. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so before we actually promote this server to a domain controller, let's actually set a static IP on this particular VM. So we're going to go to networking. IP configurations, we're going to click here. And we just want to switch this from dynamic to static. We can keep the same .4. Save. Okay, so with that created, question, from this server, will we be able to ping this Windows 10 virtual machine, being that it's in a different subnet? So let's give it a go. We're going to log into the server, and we're going to ping 10.244.1.4 to see if there's communication there. Let's look at, I'm missing a 4 here. Okay, so let's launch this. Let's launch command prompt and ping 10.244.1.4. Apparently not. So we're going to investigate why that is. Okay, so let's actually get the IP for this. We're on the server. This is the 2.4, and that Windows 10 virtual machine is on the .1.4, but we are unable to ping it. By default, I know that I'm aware of. If we go back to the diagram, there's what you call system route, and if we do a quick research on what system route is, system routes, Azure automatically creates system routes and assign the routes to each subnet in a virtual network. You can't create system route, nor can you remove system routes, but you can override system route with custom routes, basically user-defined route. So it should, once the VMs are within the same network, the same VNet, they should communicate automatically, even though they're in a different subnet based on the system route. So what I can do, let's look at the, let's go to resource groups. Okay, so let's look at the NSG for the Windows 10 network security group for the Windows 10, and let's look here. So RDP is enabled, obviously, because we can connect to it. These are default routes, by the way. What we're looking for is this guy right here. So this particular rule says that once allow VNet inbound traffic. So from any, and once it's on the virtual network, same virtual network. So this is allowed. So this is the rule that will allow us to communicate, but for some reason it's not working. So we got to troubleshoot this. What I can think about is actually removing maybe the Windows firewall is blocking, so I can maybe disable that on both VMs and see if it works. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I have the two VMs running. So let's go into the Windows 10 VM and let's go to Windows Firewall and maybe just turn this off just to see if this is causing trouble here. So I'm going to go back to that server and let's see if we can ping this. Was it 10.244.1.4? There we go. And I may need to disable the firewall on the server as well in order to ping, basically just vice versa, from the Windows 10 machine to that particular server. So ping 10.244.1.4. Sorry, that server is on .2. My apologies here. All right, so no communication because we have to do the same. So let's go back to that server and actually, if we remove this or turn off Windows Firewall, oh, we'd have to go from here. and we go back to this Windows 10 machine, if we select up arrow, we should communicate with this with that server by IP and name. So that is VI-Windows 10. So let's go back here. Okay.